Our organization is Clean Count Cook County. We are an election integrity group in Chicago and suburban Cook County. Those are two different election divisions. And I know that's an oxymoron, election integrity and Chicago. It's an aspirational name. I was just making a joke that we're an election integrity group in Chicago, and there's an oxymoron there. So our elections are extremely problematic in Chicago, but we do work in Chicago and in suburban Cook County, two completely different election divisions.
Yes.
David Orr was the clerk of Cook County, and he was the head of the suburban Cook County elections. Now Karen Yarborough is. And so that's one election division, and it's all the suburban cities in Cook County. And then Chicago has its own election division, the Chicago Board of Elections. And they're two different things.
I used to work at 69 West for the Cook County Department of Elections. That was for the suburbs in Cook County, not the city. When I ran for alderman, I ran with the city Board of Elections.
That's exactly right. They got two different offices, two different processes, and now they actually even have two different sets of machines and things, that electronic machines and whole set. The entire processes are two different things. So the Chicago Board of Elections, that is a 3-member board, and it is appointed by Tim Evans, the head of the circuit court.
Of Cook County?
Of Cook County, but we think there's a heavy Madigan influence on the naming of those 3 boards of elections. They are appointed. They are not elected.
Let's say that there is a heavy influence by Madigan. What is his goal in influencing the Chicago Board of Elections?
Oh, to bring in the vote for his candidates.
So it's supposed to be a nonpartisan board that rules on elections equitably according to statutes. So if in the interest of...
Can I just laugh for a minute there? I just want to laugh for a minute.
Well, that's their mission statement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's their mission statement. That in practicality, that is not what happens down at the Chicago Board of Elections. But that's their mission statement. That's on paper.
Okay, so if they do not adhere, if the Chicago Board of Elections does not adhere to the mission statement, they're not acting according to the rules. Do they have an actual
agenda?
Not an agenda, bylaws. Because I did not see bylaws for the Chicago Board of Elections. Do they have bylaws and a constitution? Are they acting against the bylaws and against the constitution of the Chicago Board of Elections?
They don't have a constitution. They do have some rules and regulations. So Speaker Madigan controls the House.
Yes.
And he also controls the election code in the state of Illinois with a iron fist.
Okay.
An iron fist. We know this for a fact. We've tried several times to get bills introduced and passed, just openly. And then this last year, we worked with a couple representatives to just include in a large election omnibus bill, just a couple sentences. Couple sentences. I'll give you, for instance. One was to enable risk-limiting audits. Risk-limiting audits are a very special type of post-election audit that are highly statistical, and they have more value than the audits that we have right now, which are really a joke. And so we just had like a 3-line sentence just enabling risk-limiting audits. And the day before the last day of the session, when Madigan loves to bring up these bills that he forces through, boom, those 3 lines gone. We had another 3 lines tucked into this election omnibus bill. And one of the big scams that goes on in Chicago is the vote-by-mail scam. And what happens is it's legal right now in the state of Illinois for a campaign like Rahm's campaign in 2015. He sent out applications to his supposed supporters that said, in letters that said, hey, apply for a vote-by-mail ballot. Here's your application. And if you did that, if you filled out that application, there was a return envelope to Rahm's campaign. Now, why is Rahm's campaign collecting the applications for vote-by-mail ballots? Bill?
So they can build their database.
Yeah, build their database so they can I can imagine that some people that were not their supporters never got their vote by mail ballot.
Is that true? Do you have complaints about that?
There are lots of complaints about the of receiving the vote by mail and then also
Not receiving it?
and getting on databases from this, okay? And also ROM can then know all of the people that are requesting a vote by mail. Instead of a likely voter, you become a probable voter, right? But for sure, those people got knocked on doors by the aldermanic, operatives working in that area that are tied to ROM.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. We have with us in the studio Dr. Lora Chamberlain of Clean Count Chicago and Cook County, and also Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Again, welcome to the both of you, and let's continue. If I did hear that you say that the likely voters are being approached by ROM's campaign, but the most important thing are the disenfranchised voters who were supposed to get their ballots by mail, but now they don't have their ballots by mail. Now, what do they do, and how do they make their vote count?
Exactly. So I was describing to you one little scam that goes on in Chicago. Okay, and the reason why I was describing is because we had a 3-line correction for this in that election omnibus bill in Springfield last session, and the night before the last day of the session, boom, it was gone.
Okay, what was the line? The 3-line.
It was 2 or 3 lines. I can't remember exact verbatim, but it was basically if a campaign sent out a vote by mail application to a voter, it had to include a return address to the actual Board of Elections, to the election division. Right? What is a campaign? Why is a campaign collecting the applications for a vote by mail? This is an application for a vote by mail ballot.
I see.
Okay? So you will get that vote by mail ballot in the mail. And then you fill it out and you send it back to the Board of Elections.
I see.
Okay, this is the application.
I see.
But this is just it. Even the application has no business going through a campaign. It just has no.
They pick up these at the 6th floor at 69 West Washington. Yeah. And they have to apply, and someone has to sign for these.
Right. They have to. They definitely, print out these ballot applications, and they're official ballot applications that come in campaign literature. Now, Rahm is not on the ballot, so he's not doing it this time. I'm just telling you that this is a kind of a perennial scam that's out there. And we tried to fix it, and Madigan's Tim Mapes, if you remember, line item vetoed. That was one of Madigan's one of Madigan's operatives that had to leave his office. And so we know for a fact that Madigan controls the election code. We, Clean Count Cook County, we recommend that you vote on a paper ballot. We recommend that you go on election day and you choose a paper ballot, or you ask for a vote by mail, which is a real paper ballot. Both of those are real paper ballots. Paper ballots in themselves aren't the only answer to election integrity. It's just the first step that a voter can choose. On election day, you can go in and you can ask for a paper ballot, or there's the machines. Don't go to the machines. Go ask for the paper ballot, okay? Early voting, there's no choice. You just get the machines. That's it. There's no paper ballots in early voting.
I am still an election judge, and there are certain voters that prefer the machine. So
I totally understand that. Mm-hmm. So, and if you're disabled, and that is the only way that you can vote independently, I'm not going to try to talk you out of it, okay? I'm just saying that in our experience since 2003, we've been observing the elections and doing statistical evaluation and going to the audits. In our experience, we see more funny business on the vote counts from the electronic machines, from early vote. Okay?
Because you have audit monitors watching the audits.
Right. That's exactly right. And so that's the first thing that voters can do is vote on a paper ballot. And Then the other thing that they can do that's really, really important, and there's several others, I'll just go step by step. They can become a citizen audit monitor. So we have post-election monitors. We have post-election audits, okay? In Illinois, we have a 5% post-election audit.
Which means?
That means that 5% of the early voting machines are chosen at random and 5% of the election day precincts. The vote by mail ballots are not audited at all. This is one of the problems with our audits, okay? And so they start about a week after the election, and they run for about 11 days. And Clean Count Cook County, we take people into those audits. And the audits are extremely, extremely important. People have to stop trusting that our governments are counting their votes correctly. We have so much proof that they're not. The presidential election in 2000, the presidential election in 2004.
Do you have any videographic proof if there is funny business?
Oh, there's lots of it. So one thing is people can read a book called Code Red by Jonathan Simon. Mm-hmm. It outlines the election fraud that the Republicans are perpetrating in their states, in their counties, really, really well. Okay.
And you're saying that the Democratic machine in Illinois is also using those practices to perpetuate the voter fraud in Cook County and Chicago and the rest of the state?
Okay, I have to go back because voter fraud is fraud committed by a voter.
I see.
Election fraud
This is election
is
fraud.
fraud committed by organized groups, political parties, political operatives. There's a big difference.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
There's a little tiny little bit of voter fraud that happens across the U.S. And even some here in Chicago.
31
Very
instances.
tiny.
I looked at your website. 31 instances.
Right, 31 instances, exactly. But election fraud is rampant. So Code Red by Jonathan Simon is the book that you can read about the Republican perpetrated election fraud. And then Democracy Lost is a 100-page report that is online, Democracy Lost, that was put together by a group of lawyers, Election Justice USA, that really chronicled the election fraud that was perpetrated against Bernie by Democratic Party operatives in 11 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C., to flip the vote from Bernie to Hillary in the Democratic primaries. It's one of the best, big chronicles of lots of Democratic fraud, okay? We here in Chicago, we have Democratic Party manipulated elections. Welcome to America. Okay, because we are dominated by the Democratic Party.
So does that maybe start with the committee man?
Yeah, the committeemen choose there's 3 levels of election fraud that we have seen in Chicago, okay? One is the precinct level, street level election fraud. And that is, the committeemen choose the election judges. The election judges are letting, I hate to call it shenanigans, election fraud occur in their precincts. And we have seen pre-filled in ballots. We've caught them with pre-filled in ballots. We've seen ballot back stuffing, where they actually have extra ballots in the ballot box. We've seen dead people vote, a couple dead people vote in some of the precincts. We've seen people, the aldermanic operatives who are not election judges, operate the elections. They go in and they just take over the elections from the election judges, and the alderman comes in. All of these people, the aldermen, all of their operatives, everybody but an election judge, election coordinators, and election supervisors cannot touch the election material. Period. Period. And we've seen every variation of this at the precinct level. Okay, definitely in the municipal elections. Then there's a kind of a mid-level fraud. That's the vote-by-mail scams. Okay, we've also seen vote-by-mail ballots come in for with addresses of vacant buildings. That happens a lot. We've seen late arriving vote by mails that are, approved by the Chicago Board of Elections, but we are very unsure of whether these people actually live in the ward or not. It's very hard to to observe the vote by mail process. Okay, when the ballots are coming in, it takes quite a bit for a candidate to observe the vote by mail process. They would have to have somebody down at the Chicago Board of Elections 2 weeks before the elections and 2 weeks after, every single day, just waiting to see if they will process the vote by mail ballots that day. They don't bunch them by ward. They won't let you have any notice. It is really a dark hole. A couple of years ago, one of the election supervisors was fired because she found a whole box of vote-by-mail ballots in the closet, just sitting there.
What happened?
Not being processed.
What happened in that case?
She got fired. I'm not absolutely sure if the vote-by-mail ballots were processed. The Chicago Board of Elections does not let any of this be really transparent. And that's one of our biggest things, is we need a totally transparent process from start to finish.
How could we implement that? If we were able to do that, how can we ensure transparency?
We have to have a total transparent process from start to finish, okay? So we have to tighten up those loopholes. Vote-by-mail applications do not go back to the campaigns. They go back to the Chicago Board of Elections, okay? They're processed in an open, public, transparent way.
How could we do that?
We've even asked the Board of Elections to put up video cams so that we could, that people could watch on a 24-hour basis.
On a streaming website.
Right, on a streaming website, that
good.
kind of thing. We want an all-paper ballot system. We want an all-paper ballot system because we can't see into those machines. We can't see how those machines are actually counting our ballots. We can't see when the numbers come in at the central tabulator on election night from all of the precincts.
So are you advocating for cameras to actually have the cameras trained on the election tabulators so that if people were inclined to look at the election tabulators, they could see the vote being processed as it comes in?
No, it's too fast. It's too fast. You would not be able to see very much. It's very, very fast and electronic. Okay, the transmissions are coming in, but there are a lot of double checks that we would like to feed into the system. Okay, and in the suburban Cook County election divisions, we are getting those double checks into the system. And one of the big double checks on our election would be a very serious audit, of extremely statistical, serious audit.
What do you mean by that?
That audits all of the types of ballots. Right now in Illinois, we're only auditing the early vote and the election day vote, okay, by this 5% audit. But the vote by mail and the provisional ballots are not audited at all. So those are two really, and you'll see in the election code, there's always this hole, these little holes left here and there, all over the place. Madigan he's a very smart guy. I have to give him credit because he can really design a system that has loopholes.
So you mean that for those loopholes, if he needs to use them to add votes to augment what he wants the election result to be, then he could use them? That's correct.
That's correct. Now, let me tell you about the audits, and you'll understand why we know this for a fact. Okay, we've been watching the Chicago Board of Elections since 2003. If you just spend a little time down there, Bill, if you spend a little time at the Chicago Board of Elections, you start to see a lot of the funny business, right?
I have.
Okay, let's
Thank you.
also involve the public. In order to be at the Chicago Board of Election to watch this, they have to have credentials or sign up to be audit monitors. How does the process work?
Yes.
So that
Yes, and we don't completely agree with that either. We a lot of times, we are a good government organization, and we get credentials through a partner of ours, Illinois Ballot Integrity Project, and that is how we get into all of these election processes to observe.
How could the public get in there?
Yeah, this is the deal. We definitely want to take people into the audits. Okay, they can go to our website, cleancountcookcounty.org. cleancountcookcounty.org, and send us a note, and we will send you a training video and a way to choose a day, and you can come in with our credentials. You have to follow the rules, though. You have to follow the rules. It's not a free-for-all. These are limited access buildings that the audits are in. But we like to educate the public about what's going on. In March 2016, after the primaries, the Democratic primaries, we finally took, we've been going to the audits for a long time, but nobody will come with us. We've been begging people. And finally, after that audit, when Bernie lost, enough voters wanted to see the audit that we got a good group of people in, many dozen people into the audit. Okay. And because they run 21 tables at one time, and, there's lots of rules. You can't walk around, you can't talk, all this kind of stuff. Okay. So we wanted to get, a person on every table. And what we saw during that audit was that they were not counting the votes correctly for Bernie. That when they were unrolling the electronic voting machine, big paper tape where all of the ballots are stamped on it, if they had gotten enough votes for Bernie and they needed more votes for Hillary, they'd just roll past Bernie votes. They just wouldn't call it out, okay? Or they would write the Bernie votes on Post-it notes, and then they would throw it away. Or they would write the Bernie votes on a tally sheet in pencil, and at the end they would just erase it and add Hillary votes. It was ridiculous. We all saw it. Every single one of us saw it. It was ridiculous. So we went to the Board of Elections. You can find this video on our website, Clean Count Cook County. And we said, hey, listen, you got a fraudulent audit going on there. You got a fraudulent audit. Although we weren't able to count every single vote for Bernie to have an exact number, we figured that maybe sometimes just guesstimating that there might have been somewhere around 70 votes per electronic voting machine, and there's 500 out in the field that were altered. So that's 20,000 votes. That's a lot of votes. Okay. We demanded for a recount, a re-audit. They were incredulous. They didn't do anything. And we went to the Illinois State Board of Elections, and they told us point blank that they are a toothless tiger. The Illinois State Board of Elections is a toothless tiger. They have no subpoena. They have no investigatory powers at all with the boards of elections. All the Board of Election had to do was send a report to them, and they just bought it.
So you can take that to the courts.
Well, we went to the courts. Okay, we said Chicago is running a bogus operation here. This audit was completely fraudulent, and the several people that were there, and they lasted for about a year and a half. Basically, we were running out of money. The courts were saying that we should really be in state court and not federal court, but we basically ran out of money. The Board of Elections has lawyers on retainer, and they can just ride you out. We have limited resources. They have unlimited resources. The judge told us that we had a really good case, but we had to, pursue it in court. Sometimes these things would take years, and we just didn't have enough money. People move on from the elections. We've told lots of candidates that they should challenge elections, and they say to us, I'm out of money. I ran a campaign, I'm out of money. Okay. So we are really, really, really concerned about the Chicago Board of Elections, the validity of their elections. We're really, really concerned about it. And we're less concerned about the validity of the suburban Cook County.
Why?
Because we've gone into those audits, and they were legitimate. They were legitimate. Mm-hmm. They were counting off the votes. They were adding up the votes exactly as they were.
That was my experience working there.
Right.
I would look at the tab and read off a name. The person across the table would have a duplicate of the tab, read off the name, and we go check.
That's exactly
right.
right.
And we go through each one, and at the end of the night, all of that goes into the safe.
That's exactly right. So we've been in there observing their audits, and they are very, they appear to be clean audits. When we were in Chicago in March of 2016, it was bogus. You would have been able to see it. You would have been able to see it.
The
rolling past votes, writing them on Post-it notes, and throwing them away.
So the paper ballots that the paper roll that is taken out of the voting machine, they could just throw it away. It's not archived. It's not.
Yeah, it is archived. It's archived, but the audits are the only time that we get to see the votes. That's it. All the rest of the time, the votes are in the machines. The votes are in the central tabulator. There's no seeing the votes.
Yeah, but the paper trail, the actual tangible paper, they threw that away. It's not kept somewhere.
No, it is kept. It's kept for 22 months, but you have to go to court to see it. Besides those audits, you have to go to court to see it. You can't even FOIA for it.
Why not? Isn't that
because
against
Madigan
FOIA
has made that one of the laws in Illinois? That's a very good question. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be able to count the votes afterwards? As many times as you want, right?
A review process, an independent citizen review process.
Right.
FOIA is federal, so you do mean that Madigan is?
You have to go to court. Mm-hmm. Once the proclamation has happened, then all of the election material is sealed, and you have to have a court order to open it.
That's Madigan's rules. It's to get around the FOIA.
It's Madigan's rules. It's written into the state election code. So there are other states that are more liberal with that. Okay. So here I'm going to talk to you about the audits that we want. Okay. We want risk-limiting audits, which are hyper-statistical, which means if you win by a certain percentage, okay, or you lose by a certain percentage, the whole question to a risk-limiting audit is, do the actual votes prove that the assumption by the Board of Elections that this person won is the actual result, okay? It asks a total different question than the audits that we have right now. So what it does is, if you won by a certain percentage, then we would recount a certain number of ballots drawn from random from the entire pool of ballots, the vote by mail, the provisionals, the early vote, the electronic voting, the election day ballots, from that entire pool. So we would go and we would pick a statistical sampling at random of all of these different pools of ballots, and then we would count those ballots, the actual ballots, okay? And what we would like, Clean Count Cook County, we want those ballots to be projected onto a wall so everybody can come in. They would be, behind a fence so that they can't jump over the fence and grab the election material and run away with it, okay? So there'd be a fence, but they'd be able to see it, and everybody could count their candidates' votes, right?
Yes.
And we would have these ballots, projected until the end of the audit. The thing about risk-limiting audits is if the actual ballots do not prove that the winner was chosen correctly, then they have to pull more ballots and more ballots in a statistical fashion, in a random fashion, until they get enough that prove that the results were correct. Or they've counted 100%. So risk-limiting audits expand if necessary. That's really important.
Was there any problem before? Just out of curiosity, since it's risk unlimited audits right now, so if they find a result that counters the projected result, then they just let it go and not even mention it? Did that ever happen?
It's ridiculous. So prior to our real intervention in March 2016 at the Board of Elections audits, before that, a few of us had been in. But remember, it's a huge room, 21 tables. It's hard for a few people to say too much about an audit that is that big and you can't observe everything, right? So in March 2016, we finally got enough people down there so we could be watching, every table, right? That prior to that time, the Board of Elections reported to the Illinois State Board of Elections every single election that they had perfect audits, 0 discrepancies. Absolutely perfect, time after time after time, Okay. Then comes the 2016 audit, and we went to the Board of Elections. We went to the State Board of Elections. The Board of Elections said that they had a perfect audit again. Okay. And it may have been a few discrepancies because they knew that we were there. But basically it was close. Then after that, we made a big stink. Okay, we put out a video. It got hundreds of thousands of hits. Okay, and we got picked up by some national TV. We really made a big stink about this because we were tired of this. We've seen fraud in the Chicago Board of Elections since 2003, over and over and over, different variations. Okay, we were not surprised by this. So then we had the Chicago Board of Elections hired an independent auditing firm to make recommendations about their audits. And all of the recommendations that independent auditing firm came in were all the things that we were complaining about. So then the next audit, which was in November of 2016, we went down to that. We were like, okay, let's see if they've improved things at the Chicago Board of Elections. The audit itself went from about 6 days to 11 days. It doubled in cost, maybe even more. They were extremely angry with us. We were treated horribly. We couldn't sit. We couldn't do it. We were just treated horribly. And they had to report to the Illinois State Board of Elections that they could not reconcile over 2,200 ballot positions. That was their report. So they went from perfect audits to, oh gosh, we can't reconcile 2,200 ballot positions.
That sounds like a PR campaign that turned into a PR nightmare.
That's exactly right. And the only difference was that they actually had to do a legitimate audit. That's it. We forced them to do a legitimate audit, and they couldn't do it. Now, that tells us that the rolls of the paper ballot and the vote totals that they say are coming from those electronic machines, they don't match. So they're flipping the vote. They're flipping the vote on the electronic voting machine.
Even though there were 2,200 discrepancies, there wasn't a recount.
That's correct. Nothing came of it. They had to write a report to the Illinois State Board of Elections, and the Illinois State Board of Elections told us that they have no investigatory powers, no subpoena powers, and that's all that's listed in the Illinois Election Code per Madigan.
So no heads rolled.
No heads rolled. Now, we did get a few people resigning from the Chicago Board of Elections during all this, but no heads rolled. No heads rolled, and no elections were changed. A risk-limiting audit, we want the results of the election to be altered if the audit doesn't correspond to the reported results. The reported results on the night of the election, this is just their numbers, the Chicago Board of Elections numbers. It's not something verified in rock or stone or anything.
So if you do find a discrepancy, what you want is a recount or to actually change the result of the election?
Yes. We want a legitimate audit of the ballots. The findings in the audit would alter the election results. That's what we want.
The 2,200...
And we want it to be observed and be transparent for all the voters.
The 2,200 discrepancies were the votes for Bernie, or was it just not for Hillary? What do you mean by a discrepancy?
This was in November of 2016, and it was very hard to determine exactly what all the discrepancies were. But they could never, the Board of Elections employees could never achieve a count on the actual ballots, on the actual votes that corresponded to what the Board of Elections was reporting.
Why couldn't they achieve it? Because there was already other fraud that happened already that made the meeting of the two results possible, like the audit and the actual result. There wasn't any way to we correlate the two because there had been election fraud already.
Yes. Yes, this is what we believe. We think that they are flipping the vote on the early vote on the electronic voting machines at the central tabulator as the night goes on, and they're literally flipping the vote. 2 votes, 3 votes per precinct, and that is why they can't reconcile their audits. Now, until they have a legitimate audit that is transparent and they allow us to see everything and we get to tally while they're tallying, then we will alter our assessment of this situation. But right now it's bad. It's really bad. They're not reconciling their numbers, and they're not even contrite about it at all. They are completely in your face about it. They just write a report to the Illinois State Board of Elections, and if you go to the Chicago Board of Elections, they're like, well, we'll have to do better next time. Okay, there's one guy. The Chicago Board of Elections is 1 Republican and 2 Democrats. The Democrats are absolutely tied to Madigan. There's no question about it. I can go into that story later. But the 1 Republican guy, his name is Cressy. He's a forensic auditor. But he doesn't seem to really want to push the envelope very much at all. And the Illinois State Board of Elections don't want to push the envelope at all either.
Why not?
It's a half Republican, half Democrat.
And both sides wanted to stay this way to serve their purposes. Why would they want the status quo?
Yeah, it seems like this is a kind of an honorary position. Some of the Democrats on the Illinois State Board of Election don't seem to really be that interested in elections.
Are they paid? Are they paid
yeah,
positions?
It's a paid position, and it's I believe it's from the governor. The governor appoints them, so it's kind of a luxury position.
And
right?
if they want to do what's right, they would lose their job as board members?
I am not absolutely sure about that, because so far we haven't seen a lot of evidence that they really want to do their job. Now, the Democrats on the Illinois State Board of Elections are better than the Republicans.
How so?
They seem to be more concerned about, good government and clean elections. They seem to be a little bit more concerned.
But they're under Michael Madigan's thumb. I don't see how they're concerned for cleaner elections if they are under Michael Madigan's thumb.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree. I think we should have how about this? I think that all of the good government organizations across Illinois should nominate people with actual credentials in elections, and that we should be choosing some of these as at random, right?
To be board members?
To be board members, exactly. And I think we should switch them up. And I think that the voters should be able to decide to get rid of members of the board, and they could vote to get rid of them, and then we'd choose some more at random. But there would be certain criteria that they would have to meet to even be a nominee.
Is that part of what is in H.R. 1?
H.R. 1 does not have that in it. H.R. 1 is a federal bill, and thank God for H.R. 1. We are liking a lot that's in H.R. 1, okay? It is a federal bill that deals with election integrity, campaign finance, ethics, governmental ethics. It's a really, really broad-ranging bill. The federal government can only determine the qualifications and certain aspects of the federal elections. We have state control of the elections, okay? So only certain things can be determined by the feds, and only for the federal elections. But oftentimes, if you're getting into an election jurisdiction, and there are requirements by the federal government for the federal elections, they're not going to want to try to have 2 different types of elections, state elections completely run totally different, and federal elections. So this bill will do a lot. It calls for paper ballots for all federal election. All voters can choose a paper ballot. If you are disabled and you need to vote on a machine, if you are language challenged, okay, there's several reasons why the voting on machine is a little bit more attractive as far as assistive devices.
Yes.
If you're like that, you can go ahead and vote on a machine. But the majority of people would be encouraged to vote on a paper ballot. It also, there's all sorts of things to this bill. It is actually a really, really good bill to look up and read. So, because they are really trying to revamp our elections.
Who is the sponsor of the bill?
It is Representative Sarbanes from Maryland. There were
Sarbanes-Oxley? That's Sarbanes?
I think he's related to that Sarbanes, but I don't think he is the actual Sarbanes. I think he's related to that.
I see.
Him. So he's a representative, and I'll have to look that up if he's a Sarbanes-Oxley bill. So H.R. 1 is For the People Act. That's the name of it. Okay. Automatic voting registration is 1, 2.
So opt out instead of opt in, or just opt out.
It's different. I believe it's an opt out, situation. I have to read all the details of this bill. It's really, really a big bill. So I have read the summaries, some of the aspects of it. So automatic voter registration. Now, this is for the entire country. So this is really important because voter suppression is a very serious problem.
How long has H.R. 1 been in the pipeline and not getting passed?
It just got introduced January 3rd. This is the new Congress. He's a representative. This is the new House.
I see.
Okay. It would outlaw voter purges for non-voting. Right now, in some states, if you don't vote, you get dropped from the rolls.
If you're inactive, when I was working at Cook County Department of Elections, we would call, we would send mail, whatever it would take to find the person. If we can't find them, then they're dropped.
Yes, that's exactly right. This is so we don't have a lot of problem with voter purges here and voter suppression in Illinois, and that's part of it. That's, if somebody doesn't vote, I believe it's 2 federal elections, right? 2 federal elections, they get multiple mailings to their house, and they get a phone call contact, and even sometimes people try to go out to the house. That's what happens here in Illinois. That is not what happens in other states, okay? In other states, if you don't vote in a federal election or 2 federal elections, then you're dropped from the rolls. That's outlawed by this H.R. 1. So it's in the pipeline, and it's in consideration. Now, let's be real here. We have a Democratic House, and this is their number 1 priority bill, but we have a Republican Senate. So until 2020, at the very earliest. So the chances of H.R. 1 being passed are very, very small. Look at what's happening with Trump shutting down the government over the immigration issue. There's no emergency that this has to happen. So you can see we are really, our federal government is completely dysfunctional.
You mentioned the red shift in the website. Explain for us how the red shift in every competitive election has consistently shifted vote counts to the right of every baseline and exit poll measure. What is the red shift?
The red shift occurs in Republican states and Republican counties. So that book that I recommended, Code Red by Jonathan Simon, that talks about the red shift. And what we've seen statistically over and over and over again is that the Republicans, if there is an exit poll that is done, or even if there's very serious pre-election polls, then very often in these Republican states, in these Republican counties, the official results, the reported results, will be shifted to the Republican Party by a very serious amount of percentage points. An exit poll has a margin of error of plus or minus 1 or 2 percentage points. That's it. A real exit poll, like in every other country but America, in every other country but America, exit polls are considered a very serious check on election fraud. If they're past 1 or 2%, the UN calls for further investigation for election fraud. Only in America, okay? And do you want to know why? Only in America do the exit polls vary so greatly. In some places, they're varying 5, 10%, and they still say, well, it's a valid election. That is bullcocky. It's absolute bullcocky. And the exit polls, for the presidential, the exit polls in America, they're commissioned by a multimedia consortium. And they're always commissioned by Edison Matovsky. And what he's doing, that pollster is doing at the end of the day, is he is correcting the numbers to fit the reported results. That is not what an exit poll should do. That's election fraud. When you correct an exit poll to fit the reported numbers, that's election fraud.
So what you're saying is that the numbers there is a discrepancy in the exit poll numbers with the election results because there has been election fraud.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. In Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, so just Trump's election, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, there was serious election fraud for Trump. Serious. Jill Stein's recount effort in all three of those states are still in court. Arguing. She just got decisions in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin in a pro-democracy way, okay? They're counting this stuff in the back room on computers that can be easily manipulated. These reports are coming from election machines. The audits are not being done. Their audits are not being done. Then they sequester the material, and then you need an act of God. You need to go to court. So you need money for a lawyer, and you need a couple years to be able to survive in court. It's a scam. It's a scam. We absolutely need election integrity in this country. Our elections have been fraudulent on many, many levels.
So
the presidential level for Bush, 1. Bush 2. So 2000, 2004, okay. Trump's presidential election for sure. All of those were completely manipulated, absolutely bogus.
So the H.R. 1 was submitted by the Democrats in response to the red shift, is what you're saying?
Yeah, they were getting slaughtered all over the place. Many, many reps and senator races have been ripped in many, many states across the country. So the Democrats, there are good government Democrats. Not all of them would be happy to admit that, they stole the vote from Bernie to give to Hillary. Not all of them. So there are good government Democrats. They put together a really, 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 I'm still reading this bill, by the way. It's a very broad-reaching bill.
Let me ask you this. Are there any Republicans that joined in on the bill?
No, not so far. I'll have to check. I didn't check last night.
What about other political parties like libertarians or other such?
I think that the Green Party is looking at this very closely. Okay. I haven't read anything official from them. But the Green Party definitely has one of their planks as election integrity. They know for a fact that they've been manipulated. The ballot access has been manipulated against the Green Party in many states. And we do not have secure elections.
So what you're saying is that the Republicans and maybe the Democrats do see the Green Party as a threat. Otherwise, why even bother trying to counter the Green Party vote?
Absolutely. Yeah, but they use the same tactics against the Green Party as they use against people that are challenging the incumbents as well. It's a big incumbent protection racket.
I see.
Okay? And so if the incumbents are Republicans, then they're protecting them. If the incumbents are Democrats, then they're protecting them. So it's an incumbent protection racket.
Are there any incumbents that are progressively that want clean elections?
A lot of people are really, really sick and tired of this. Stacey Abrams, she was running for Georgia. She was the one that was running for the governor against Brian Kemp. And they really pulled out every trick in the book against her.
They moved the polling places to inaccessible places for people who don't have vehicles.
It was ridiculous. It was a slaughter. It was election fraud. So this is not shenanigans, election shenanigans, like, play good in the sandbox. This is election fraud. He used voter suppression. He used voter purges. He moved the polling places. He manipulated so many votes that he is not a legitimately elected individual.
Well, the thing about it is he had governance over the elections, and he was trying to get elected.
Right. It was ridiculous. I think she dropped her actual election challenge, but she's in court challenging different aspects of the election, like the voter purges. Why in Illinois you miss 2 federal elections and you get all of this contact. You get mail, you get phone calls, people come out to your house. But in Georgia, you miss 1 election and boom, you're off. You're off the vote rolls.
You mentioned voters that haven't been active being contacted in Illinois. What if the voters don't vote according to the political party's wishes? Are those voters contacted, or only the voters that the party wants who are contacted and they attempt to keep on the voter rolls?
Okay. It is my understanding that in suburban Cook County, that all the voters, they go through a process. And in Chicago, we don't see a lot of evidence of a lot of people getting purged from the rolls. So I believe that in the Chicago Board of Elections, they're following the process correctly as well. We haven't gotten a lot of reports from that. What we see more in Chicago is the ballot access wars. They keep the challengers from the ballot. Bill can attest to that. That is a huge political game that does not have to be played that way at all.
It ties you up. It ties you up with your money. You can't campaign. There's a whole democracy issue with that as well.
Absolutely. And one of Madigan's lawyers is always down there, Michael Casper, kicking people off the ballot. There's all sorts of operatives that are kicking people off the ballot. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely insane what happens in the ballot wars in Chicago. You literally you must have an election lawyer. You must have an election lawyer. You got to have a team of people helping you. It's it's very, very difficult for a challenger to get on the ballot. We don't have to live like this. Our democracy doesn't have to be like this. So that's one thing we see a lot. We also see a lot of precinct level fraud in the municipal elections. So voters out there, if you go and you vote in this municipal election coming up February 26th, and you get a paper ballot that already has a mark on it for some other candidate, return that ballot immediately and get a new one that is blank. Please check your ballots.
Is there any way for a voter to take a picture of that and complain to the Chicago Board of Election? But what good would that do?
Definitely, if you're in your voter booth, okay, it's actually illegal to take a picture of your ballot. But if you get a ballot that is already filled in, and you have not
and you have
voted.
many reports of this, is what you're saying. You have complaints from voters that that's happened to them.
We got them red-handed in the 25th ward, and
in the 2016 election.
I had the election judges go through and pull out all of the ones that were already pre-filled in.
We had a magic pencil one year in the 49th ward.
Yeah, the magic pencil.
What do you mean by that? Explain the magic pencil.
It's a pen that doesn't work. And they say, well, just do it anyway and turn it in. And they give it to the people who are not likely to vote for the incumbent.
There's so much fraud at the precinct level. We really need all the voters to get engaged about this stuff. We really do.
So there isn't any voter hotline for voters to report any funny business that they encounter?
There is. There is a 1-866-OUR-VOTE is one, okay? But also, Clean Count Cook County, we would like people to send us an email. We are at cleancountcookcounty@gmail.com. And also you can go to our website and you can send us a note as well. Because the number that I gave you, the Election Protection Coalition, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, OURVOTE, their findings, we don't really get to access their findings. They don't share it very well.
Why not?
And it's a bunch of lawyers that put that together. They have this hotline for people. It's mostly to try to get you to the right precinct on election day. And the rest of the data that might come into there we don't really see much of it. We may see it in a couple months, but we don't see it in a timely fashion. So they're helpful to get you to the right precinct, okay? To get you some information if you're being really abused by an election judge. In Chicago, we have over 2,000 precincts. And I'm telling you, not all those election judges are good at all. At all. And in fact, voters, if you're listening to me, the number one thing that you can do to protect your vote is to vote on a paper ballot. The number two thing you can do is to become an election judge and to study the material and to make sure that your precinct follows the letter of the law and all of the procedures. That would be really, really helpful. We need good election judges in Chicago. The number three thing that you can do is you can become a poll watcher for your candidate. Okay, they get to send in poll watchers, and the poll watchers get to remind the election judges that they're not following the rules and regulations. I've seen election judges totally obliteratedly drunk on election day. They show up like that. Okay, so that's going to be a bad precinct, and you got to get those drunk judges yanked, right?
So you got to get the credentials for this. My campaign went for the credentials, and it's about 2 weeks. 2 weeks out before they get them.
Right.
On the 6th floor.
That's exactly
So
right.
that
You
means
have
that
to.
without the credentials, we can't do any poll watching at the early voting sites then, correct?
That's exactly right. So,
So-
poll watching. So as a voter, you can vote on a paper ballot. Number 2, you can make sure that you're calling in and reporting anything that happens at the election jurisdiction or the precinct. You can also call directly to the Board of Elections and report anything that you see at the precincts to the Board of Elections as well. We want you to, if you see something, say something. Multiple places, okay? Number 3, you can become a poll watcher, and you can go into the early voting, you can go into Election Day, and you can go into the post-election canvassing, where they still count a lot of ballots after Election Day. Vote-by-mail ballots are still being counted. Lots of ballots are being counted after election evening. All of that takes a credential, and that credential would be given to you by your favorite candidate, okay? Or you can contact us, Clean Count Cook County. We are a good government organization. We do not pick winners or losers, and we take people into the post-election audit. And we citizens, all you need to be is a registered voter in Illinois. And you can contact us on our website, cleancountcookcounty.org, and we will send you some preparatory information, get you to sign up for a day, meet you there, give you a credential, and you'll have to follow some rules. We'll be right there and can help us with the post-election audit. We really would appreciate it.
So this is the most important task that you need help on, because I was going to ask you how students and our community listeners can participate in securing a clean count. Is there anything else that you need for a clean count?
Right.
Cook County.
If you want to help and you really want to help clean up our elections, no one person is going to do this. That's for sure. There's no one person that can do it. All of those things. Vote on a paper ballot. If you see something, say something. Call the number. I'll give the number again to the lawyers, 866-OUR-VOTE, OURVOTE, our website, cleancountcookcounty.org, and the Chicago Board of Elections Central Office.
For all 3 places, if they call in, is there any way that the voter can get a report so that they
Right.
could follow up in the future what has been done concerning my report?
Yeah, you can get a report number. And on Election Day, if you are facing real problems at the precinct, if you're facing real problems, you can demand that the election judges call an election supervisor. And they will send over. Now, if you have to have a little time, they're not going to come over there in 2 seconds. But you can stomp your feet and say, no. Okay?
And also, I think that if they were to do that, would it be good for them to get a case number so
Right.
that they could keep on following up to see whether their complaint has been addressed and follow it all the way to the end?
I totally agree with that.
And
totally agree
then
with
even
that.
with electioneering, past the cones, the alderman bringing a box of donuts, or the alderman glad handing inside of the election.
Oh, yeah.
What
okay,
is
so we
what do
see
you mean
all-
by glad handing?
Okay,
Bill?
we see all this stuff too. This is all illegal too. It's all election fraud.
What is glad handing?
Go ahead, you.
Shaking hands and saying vote for me within election space.
So the rules are that the election space, with the actual precinct, all of that has to be non-partisan, no specific candidate. So the aldermen and all of the aldermen's operatives, they have to come into the, if they're going to come into a precinct, they have to present a credential. They have to they have to not touch the election material. They have to not talk to the voters. They can't be putting sample ballots on the main desk with all of the election material. They can't be putting sample ballots anywhere in the precinct at all. They have to be outside the precinct. If they're going to pass a palm card or press some flesh, they got to be outside past the blue cones. That is that's when you can start doing what's called electioneering.
Right.
Outside past the
100
blue
feet
cone.
away from the
Right.
doors to entrance to the voting.
So if a alderman comes through your precinct and is starting to, shake everybody's hand and interrupt the voters from voting, this is completely illegitimate. That is election fraud. That it should not be happening whatsoever.
What are the penalties for that if the board wants to prosecute?
Okay, so if the board ever wanted to prosecute, they could, and the Illinois State Board of Elections could put up a fuss as well. The first step is if the voter wanted to call the election supervisor, you should definitely mention it to the election judges. Hey, listen, don't you think that alderman should be outside the blue cones? Okay, that's the number one thing you can do. Number two, you can call the election central and complain. You can get an election supervisor to come in. You can have them call a state's attorney's team, or Illinois Attorney General has teams as well. You could ask them to call in those people. You could call the media. You could call the 866 our vote number. You could definitely drop us a line on our website, Clean County, Cook County. We want to hear about that. And then a lot of this is after the election, putting up a fuss, right? In the media and also at the Chicago Board of Elections. For the elections, definitely the squeaky wheel gets the oil. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Okay, so if any candidate encounters real severe election fraud, please have your media list ready. Make sure that you're, standing out there and you're really making a fuss. This election, a libertarian candidate, slightly libertarian candidate. It's a nonpartisan election, but I think he does claim that he's libertarian. His name is Krupa, and he is in the 15th ward, I believe, 15th or 13th ward. They were really going after him. Mm-hmm. His alderman is Marty Quinn, and they were going after him to try to kick him off the ballot with affidavits that were signed by the voters, but they were phony affidavits. They were being coerced. The voters, they were going to voters in the ward saying, "Listen, sign this affidavit saying you never signed Krupa's petition, or else your garbage is never going to get picked up again." Okay, that it appears that that's what happened.
Let's do a station ID.
Okay.
This is WZRD Chicago, 88.3 FM. We have with us in the studio Dr. Lora Chamberlain of Clean County Chicago, and also Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, who also worked at the Cook County Board of Elections prior.
Go.
Yes, please continue, Laura.
Yeah, so Krupa just really made us think about it in front of the media, and they dropped that challenge, and they dropped those affidavits because those affidavits were being coerced. There's no question about it. So that's election fraud. That's election fraud. So
and no consequences for the perpetrators.
That's exactly right.
And maybe that's why the aldermen are so brazen.
Yeah.
With what they do.
There's State's Attorney Kim Fox is actually charged with investigating election fraud and prosecuting it. And before she was elected, we had her promise in front of a group called the Northside Democracy for America that she would investigate an election fraud because Anita Alvarez would never do it. Never, ever. You would report it to her office, and it just would fall into a pit of black hole. And Kim Fox looks like she's just following in the footsteps of Anita Alvarez. Because
what is the next step that voters could take if Kim Fox won't prosecute? Is it the U.S. attorney to plead that since Kim Fox won't prosecute, will you prosecute, please?
So we definitely have reported to the FBI. Reported instances of election fraud since, throughout the years, to the FBI, to the Department of Justice, to the U.S. Attorney. Mm-hmm. We've also reported it to the Inspector General.
Inspector General of which level?
Of the city. Okay. Faisal is gone, right? So Inspector General of the city. And I can't say that we've gotten very many investigations.
Are there any other inspectors generals that you could appeal to?
The other people that are involved are the state's attorney's office and the attorney general's office. The Illinois attorney general has some jurisdiction. Lisa Madigan felt that it was really mostly about disenfranchisement. So if it had a racial component to it, okay? I think that was her own interpretation. So in this election coming up, I will tell you, if we see major fraud, I'll be calling the state's attorney, the attorney general, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the inspector general. Again, what would be really, really helpful is if more people were doing it.
Do you know of any people that are doing it? Can the public access the complaint list? How many complaints were filed to the Board of Election concerning election fraud?
That's, you have to FOIA for it. But
Has anybody filed for it? Have you filed for it?
Yep, we have. We have.
And then how many people have complained?
They do get hundreds of calls. They get hundreds of calls on election day.
Does every call have a case number?
Most of them have case numbers. Some of them say resolved. Okay, so you're getting a log of their, and this is not right away. This is after the election.
How long after?
Okay.
How long after?
After the proclamation. They make sure that they don't get you any FOIA-able material until after the proclamation of results. Okay.
To not disturb the incumbent.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because remember, then you have to go to court. We would really like people to volunteer with our organization. We really do good work, and we need more people involved in this, for sure.
I have another question.
Sure.
I looked at your website, and there was a talk about hackable DREs. What is a DRE?
DREs are those electronic voting machines that you are...
What does DRE stand for then?
It's direct recording device. Okay. Direct recording electronic voting device.
I see.
Something like that. And so we have them here in Chicago. The electronic voting machines are DREs, okay? And they count, there's a little flash drive in the back of the machine that is counting the votes. And they also print up on the side something that you can see. But what's printed up on that piece of paper and what's counted in the back of the machine could be two totally different things. The other thing that we know is that there's a very serious possibility of fraud at the central tabulator.
Right.
So when all of our votes are being transmitted on election night, it's coming in very fast. You can't really watch it. And it's coming up on these computers. And they could run high-level algorithms on the computers, flip every second vote to so-and-so from so-and-so.
So this is transmitted by the internet?
It is not transmitted by the internet. It's over what they call secure airwaves.
A secure airwave, yeah.
Yeah, it's what they call secure airwaves. We haven't seen any evidence of people hacking in and altering the stream to the Board of Elections. We haven't seen that. Okay.
Do you have any evidence of hacking having taken place?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the audits in Chicago are not matching up. They're not able to reconcile the number. Okay? They're not able to reconcile the number. On election day, they're not able to reconcile the numbers at the precincts in many of the precincts. And what I mean by that is they have more ballots than they voted than they think they should.
What is that? Do you have a percentage of non-reconciliations?
Every election is different, okay? But I would say that there's definitely about 10% of the precincts that are really, really, really problematic, okay? And they call them discrepant precincts. And they have a whole process after the election to look at the discrepant precincts. Our elections are not run as purely and as accurately as you think they are.
When the Chicago Board of Elections says that every precinct got reconciled, did they say that when there was still that 10% of precincts that were not reconcilable?
So a lot of times, the Chicago Board of Elections, I mean, they say it all the time, we run good, clean elections. What they say and what we're able to prove are two different things.
So that's like 200 precincts, if there's 2,000.
Right. It definitely, in certain elections, it's been that high. Sometimes it's less than that, okay? And it depends on what they're calling, problematic precincts. But they definitely have a pile of precincts that they're precincts with obvious discrepancies. Okay.
What happened to those problematic precincts then? Are they counted or are they discarded?
No, I've never seen them just discard. Just throw some ballots away, okay? That I've seen. Okay, I have seen them find. I have heard that they've found boxes of ballots in some closets. So somebody's moving ballots someplace. Okay. They don't let you watch everything. They don't let you see everything. It takes an army of people to be able to watch the election processes completely.
What is the result of the problematic precincts then? How are those votes counted if they're problematic?
They are typically taken out and they run the ballots through another machine, or they unroll that toilet paper roll, which is where all the ballot. So it's not a toilet paper roll. It's a, cash register receipt where your ballots, your choices have been stamped. So they unroll them. But we see the same problems. The numbers aren't always adding up, and they just make a report to the Illinois State Board of Elections and nothing happens.
Are the problem precincts maybe the same precincts every year?
Some I have had recurrent, but sometimes we've gone to the Board of Elections and said, wow, this is a really, really problematic polling place, and they'll get new election judges in there or something like that. It's not like they never respond to us at all. But it's very, very often where we are not shown all of the information to really be able to accurately see whether some discrepancy is being resolved. It ends up in a black hole, so they're not really resolving it. And it takes an army of people. When they do the post-election canvassing and the audits, they're usually running dozens of tables.